All right.
Well, this is the 12th Armored Division Memorial Museum in Abilene, Texas. We are at the 55th Annual Reunion here at Abilene, and it is October 6th, 2001. We are here with Robert Kampling. He is with the C Company of the 66th AIB. My name is Michelle Colvin, and let's just go ahead and get started.
All right.
Let's get started with when you were born and where you were born and a little bit about your parents.
Well, I was born June the 1st, 1922, in Anaheim, California. I lived there until I understand, until I was 5 years old. And then my parents moved to Corona, California, and that's about 40 miles east of Anaheim. And I was there, and I'm still living in Corona, California. So my dad had a citrus grove in Corona. In fact, two different places we had citrus there, and I did a lot of work as if I wasn't going to school in Corona, why I was working on the ranch and driving tractor or irrigating or something like that, especially during the summer. I went all through high school, or all through schools in Corona, and I graduated, not with honors, but I graduated. So everything was fine. My folks lived to be a good age. My father died when he was 83, and my mother passed away at 94. And I had two brothers and one sister. My sister and I are the only ones living now, and she lives about 40 miles east of Corona. And I got married. Do you want me to continue on? I got married May the 10th, 1947, I guess it was, and married Leona. We went on and have three girls. Diana is the oldest, and Barbara's the middle girl, and Jeanette's the young one. I know the oldest one is 50 years old, but I can't remember the other ages, but they're down the road there too. We just celebrated her 50th birthday, and that seems very unusual to me, but it is. We have one grandson, born to Barbara. His name is Jesse. Now, you want me to continue on there?
Well, why don't you just tell me where you were at when Pearl Harbor was bombed?
Well, we lived at Corona, at the house in Corona, and we had, your usual things on Sunday morning of doing different things, and the radio was never on, and all of a sudden we had company from Anaheim come over for dinner that day, and they got there at 10 or 11 o'clock, whenever it was, and they said they had the radio on, and did you hear what happened in Pearl Harbor? And so we turned the radio on right there and heard all the things that had happened to Pearl Harbor. Probably it came in our time, it was close to 11 o'clock, I guess, in the morning. I can't remember how much time elapsed from the time that they first came on until we found out about it. And that was the time that's when I remember or heard about Pearl Harbor.
So how did you enter in the service?
I was drafted. I was drafted and went on a bus we had to go to Riverside to catch the bus. It was full of other draftees, and they took us to Long Beach, San Pedro, Fort MacArthur, and they interrogated us there, or whatever you call that, and we had to take our tests and physical and everything else there. And I think I was there 3 days, and then left by train and headed for Camp Campbell, Kentucky. And it took, I would think, at least 4 or 5 days to get there. We went through Texas and back up, and I can still remember, because one of the worst train rides a person would ever have. The train was, the windows, there was no, windows were all open. It was so hot in September, and the windows were open and full of kids, and time you sat on the track and didn't get on there and go nowhere, and then the next time you'd be going again. And I know it was a long stretch to get to, and for a young kid just like everybody else, it was kind of a disturbing thing. But we made it, and we got to Camp Camel, Kentucky. And I was there for, well, I was there the full time. But anyway, I was in the maintenance, see, and there, and we had our half tracks, but then we didn't have any half tracks, so I was called along with another buddy, Mossy McDonald, to go to the motor pool. The motor pool sergeant asked us to come over. We didn't have any tools or no half tracks or anything, but somebody had to be at the motor pool, and we had a motor sergeant that had a girlfriend in Louisville, so he spent most of the time in Louisville in Kentucky, and then Sergeant Hall, I guess he was to do the paperwork. I never saw him do anything, but anyway, he was married and lived in Abilene here, and he was gone most of the time, so they brought us over here to run the motor pool with nobody there and nothing there. But anyway, we were there, and eventually, in I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks, something like that, we did start getting vehicles. And after we got enough to go, then we asked in the company who wanted to drive a half track, and we had all kinds. I bet we had at least 40 people. Well, all we needed was 13, I believe. And so we took them out on the hills and drove back and forth, and there was a lot of them. I don't think they'd ever been behind the wheel of a car before. And so there was a lot of them we eliminated right away. And the ones that we had, we picked, and for the truck drivers, we had a supply truck and also the kitchen truck. We had those two also. And I think it was very, very good that I commented here a year or so ago that I think almost everyone that was in what we had as drivers went on through and was in combat with us. And I got pretty well acquainted with them when you're meeting them every day as drivers, and we had to keep the drivers busy every day, like had to wash the half track every other day, and you'd go around the block almost, and we'd make them change oil and anything to keep them busy, and polish this or do that. And we kept all the drivers busy because there really wasn't anything to do there. Wasn't anything going wrong with a half track, so there wasn't nothing to do except you probably the same thing. You go around the boulevard or go down around the camp where you'd make them grease the thing too, and they'd have to get underneath and grease the track and grease the whole vehicle. So there's probably a lot of wasted oil and grease, but at least you kept the drivers busy doing something. And then we went on Tennessee maneuvers, and one night, the first night we got there, it was getting to be real cold, and they thought it would be snow coming up, and so we had to get all the drivers out and put extra pressed antifreeze in the tracks in the radiator to keep it from freezing and so forth, because usually they were inside the shed at the barracks. And I know Clifford Anderson and he was one of our mechanics. He and I came in way late because everybody else had their pup tent pitched, and when all the drivers left and it was all finished, well, then we came over, but we still had to pitch our pup tent, and so we pitched it, and both of us crawled in and went to sleep. And the next morning we woke up, and we had about 8 inches of snow inside, or not 8 inches, maybe 4 or 5 inches of snow inside the pup tent. Well, we figured out we had our pup tent the opposite direction of everybody else, and the wind blew a little bit. I guess the people that knew how to pitch a pup tent and knew which way to put it together when when the little breeze was coming, because they were all laughing at us because we had snow inside our pup tent. Anyway, and then soon after that, I went to mechanic school in Fort Knox, Kentucky. I went there for 3 months. One of our main thing was to disassemble a motorcycle completely and put the motorcycle back together again. And then I spent 3.5 years in the Army and never had a motorcycle. I mean, we never had a motorcycle in our company. And the next thing we did, we took the white engine off of the half track. We took it all apart. We did that and took it apart completely, disassembled it, and put it back together, and then disassembled it and put it back together. And then, according to our technical manual, we weren't allowed to touch the engine. So here, the mechanic, I was taught to do all of that. And if any work to be done on the engine, it had to be done by service company, and our little ordinary companies couldn't do anything about it. So anyway, I learned a lot about mechanics that way in school. And then by that time, our company had already left for Abilene. And when I got out of school, then they got a train. I was on the train and went to Abilene. So I don't know how much more maybe I'm dragging this out too long. I don't know.
No, this is great. Actually, I was wondering, you mentioned that you did do some schooling. Had you heard of the ASTP program at that time? Or?
No.
So tell me about your experience in...
This wasn't ASTP.
I know.
See, it was just a school of mechanics.
Right. Tell me about your experiences at Camp Berkeley.
Well, I wasn't here probably 2 or 3 weeks, as I remember. And I got a furlough, so I went home. And then I went to the rationing board and told them that I had to go from the barracks to where a motor pool where I was about a mile to get to the motor pool every morning, that I needed gas to get my car back to go to Abilene so I can go to the motor pool. And they gave me enough stamps to get to Texas with the car. And I don't think I ever used my car to go to the motor pool, but anyway, I got here with it. And I had a couple of buddies, friends, and John Nemeth and Charles Fetty, and I did a lot of driving around in my car. We went to Abilene a couple of times, and there were so many soldiers in Abilene, so we made a left turn out of the gate and went to Sweetwater, and most of the time we spent in Sweetwater, Kentucky. And we've been to Winters and Ballinger, Texas, and go for the weekend, or on Saturday night and so forth. So, and then we went to Dallas one time with the car and back, and I don't know, it must have taken a half a day to get to Dallas, or over a half a day in the car on the old highway. But then we made it. I had a '37 Oldsmobile coupe at that time, so I might say, excuse me, I might say. One day we was going, I thought it was Ballinger, but I don't know. We left Sweetwater one Sunday morning, Easter morning, and the sun was just coming up. Let's say just coming up, but anyway, it was in our eyes as we were driving, and we could see 2 planes ahead of us, half a mile or so. And lo and behold, it was 2 wasps, and they came together, piled up, and both of them crashed right in front of us, within 400, 500 feet ahead of us. And the other cars had just stopped when we got there. We were the second car that stopped there. And here one of the girls bailed out. You could just barely see that she bailed out, and the parachute was just fluffed a little bit, and she was dead. And then the other girl was about half out of the airplane when it hit the ground. It was pretty sad for us to see that, because those two girls should be somebody we were going out with or something. You know, they were all our age, cute little girls, you know, you might say, and here they ended their life. On a note, I might say, I read in my paper a couple of years ago, they had a big story on the wasp, and a lady that lived in Idlewild, and that's probably 60 miles from our place, 50 miles, something like that. It's up in the mountains. And so I kept the article, and one day I called her up to see if she was, you know, if she would see me, and sure, come on over. And so I went over and I talked to her, and she was a wasp, and it said stationed in Sweetwater, see, because it's where they start to fly out of. And I talked to her for probably an hour, and we got quite a conversation going. And she said that she had her engine that morning. She had her engine running on her airplane, and she was in the ready room or prep room. I can't remember what she said or whatever it was, whatever they did. And all of a sudden it came through the two girls had crashed. And she says, it wasn't a minute, and I was already in the airplane and took off and went. And she was circling soon after the accident happened up above. And, you know, there was kind of a coincidence that we were probably there, because we were there for probably 45 minutes. And, you know, looking around and doing this and that, and everybody else gathering there. And anyway, it was kind of a coincidence that she was probably circling overhead of us the same time that we were there on the ground. And I don't know. That's about the extent of Abilene. We were there for a year, I guess, or somewhere almost a year here.
And then you went on to Camp Shanks, or?
Yes, I went to Camp Shanks. Yeah, and one night had a pass to go to New York, and so I can't remember who it was now. I guess it was John Hunter and I went. We got on a train, or was it? We got on the subway. Came up about 42nd and Broadway. You know, you've never been there before, so came up. And then you walk around. You know what to do. Didn't know what to do. So we just finally wound up in a bar and sat and had 2 or 3, 4 drinks there, and looked at our watch and got back on the subway and headed back to camp again. And I don't remember too much of Shanks. I don't think we were there over 3 days, something like that. And Sergeant Hall, this might be a little story about him. He was older than us. Whether it was 2 years or what, I don't know. But anyway, he had a wife and a home and everything established. And most of us, or not most of us, but a whole lot of us had towels that came from home. You know, your parents sent you towels instead of using the GI towels. And well, anyway, we got this Camp Shanks, and we had to get rid of all of them. We weren't allowed to take any commercial towels home. And that Sergeant Hall, he got a box about 3 foot square, and I don't know where he found it, but he got that. And everybody put towels in there, and he sent them home. And if he's still alive, he's probably still drying on my towels. So, you know, he had a 3 foot square box, and he was stacking them in there. So it's a few comical things that happens during the years of service. Now I'll let you go from there. Now I almost got overseas now, see?
Yeah. How was your experience on the ship? And what ship were you on? Do you remember?
What
Going
ship?
Overseas?
Well, I'm sure I went over on a Kaiser Wilhelm ship. Is that right? Did you hear anybody else doing that? No, I went over on that. I had a plaque that it stated that was his ship. As the person in the motor pool, we kept busy getting rid of the half tracks and getting them ready and getting rid of them before we left. And we spent a lot of hours doing that. And then when I finished, I helped Lester Beck in the armory, taking everybody's gun. And I can't remember now whether we took it apart and put cosmoline or grease on it, to ship. And we did that for 3 or 4 days, long hours. So when I got on the ship, all of us that did that in the motor pool and the armor, we got out of KP, so we didn't have to put any KP. We had all the way over. We had free time, so made it nice. And I suppose others have said too. I remember some ships were dropping depth charges down there, and I don't know whether there was a submarine down there or whether they was trying to scare us or whether they were just practicing. I don't know, but I'll bet there was at least 30 ships going over at the same time. Staggering, this and that. As you could look over the horizon, and there were ships coming over, going over. What are they? Whether it was all troops, I wouldn't know. And we landed at. It wasn't Omaha Beach. What was it there anyway? One of the beaches, and now we landed in England first. Yeah, and that's where we got our half tracks vehicles there, and got everything prepared. So I think the first night in England was the coldest night I've ever spent. We didn't have any clothes except for clothes to keep warm. There was, I think, one blanket on the cot that we had to sleep on, and it was a cold winter night. It wasn't even a winter night, but it was a cold night, and the dampness, I guess, got to us too, and everybody complained. So the next night we had 2 or 3 blankets we could put over top of us, and we got our vehicles, and then we drove to the other side on the coast and got on board some kind of a ship and came across and landed at one of the docks there, unloaded, and drove probably 50 miles to a town. And I guess they moved the people out ahead of time or something, because all of a sudden we stayed in the house for 2 days, something like that, and then everybody took off in their half tracks and headed to Nancy, France. And we started combat, I guess you'd say, east of Nancy. I don't know, a few miles, I don't know what mileage, but anyway, it was there. Now, that's it.
So what was your
What?
first experience in combat?
Well, our motor sergeant that was with us all the time, he was so scared he didn't know what. So the motor sergeant was supposed to be standing up on the deck part of the time, and the observer and so forth. And you had to keep the lights off, and the fellow by the name of Melshoney, he was driving. Everybody took part in driving it. No particular driver was with us, because we were all mechanics and so forth, so anybody could drive. And he was driving, but he couldn't see, and he run off the road. But the Oaks, our motor sergeant, he was scared to stand up there. We weren't even in combat yet, but he got ducked down and sat in the back of the half track. And so I got up there and was trying to guide this guy, and Melshoney, and he ran off the road. So we got him back on the road, and he got off and got in the back of the half track, and then we got Cliff Anderson, and he drove, and then we could follow the column that way. See? So I guess we drove for probably in a half hour or something like that, and then we replaced the 4th Armored Division that night. But anyway, we got out, and boy, everybody had to dig a foxhole, and for a half an hour you was digging a foxhole, because that's the way the combat was supposed to be. That was my first and last foxhole I ever dug, see. And so everybody was laying around, whether he's in the foxhole or not, it didn't matter, but you was around sleeping outside in your sleeping bag. And all of a sudden, Oaks, motor sergeant, school sergeant, he wouldn't sleep outside. He slept inside the track. And all of a sudden, one of his rifle or carbine went off. We went over to see him, and he had his carbine inside his sleeping bag, and he had to pull the trigger, and his foot was right there. He was gone. He'd never seen him again. Anyway, he shot himself in the foot and got back to the United States. And so we got along. We didn't have another motor sergeant. We just went along with what we had because we all knew what to do anyway. And
who was your captain?
I don't know, Captain Hayner? Hayner? I don't know. I didn't worry. I was our vehicle was the last vehicle in the back, so we didn't have. I thought it was Lieutenant Hayner, Captain Hayner. Yeah, when he got it. But you don't ask me too many technical questions. See, I might not know that. You want me to just keep talking on what that, or do you want to ask another question or so?
I was just curious about what your experience at Hurlsheim was like.
Well, there again, I was in the maintenance, and we all had to get up pretty early in the morning at 2 or 3 o'clock, something like that, and then we left at 4. And I can still picture all the guys in their white sheets that they had to have on. And we drove about 2 miles, something like that, or 2 or 3 miles in the dark at 3 o'clock in the morning or 4, something like that. And they all got out, and then we turned around and went back to the same place where we were to start with. And we heard during the day that our men was catching heck, and having a hell of a time. About 4 o'clock, before dark, we were ordered to go back and pick the men up, and it was pretty sad that here our half track still had the 5 men in the half track, but there was quite a few half tracks came back and there was nobody in it, only the driver, and that was pretty hard to take when you had the driver had all his buddies, for years riding in that half track, and then all of a sudden they're gone, that didn't know whether they were captured or killed or what. And so it was pretty sad for the drivers. And in fact, all of them. There had to be 2 or 3 out of each half track that was gone, and a lot of them, like I say, had 3 or 4 half tracks come back empty. And it's pretty sad. You look back in the reunions you go to and all the heartaches they had there at Hurlsheim or Steinwall, and that we weren't involved in that. It was kind of lucky on one side, but it was still sad that you see your friends getting that way. Just like our president, Bob Hohwaller, said he was laying there too and got hit in the back with a shell, a German rifle shell or whatever it would be. So that would be my experience of Hurlsheim.
Were you ever injured?
Yes. The day after the war was over with, I hit myself in the head with a plier and gouged a hole in my head and had to be stitched up. Didn't get a Purple Heart because the day that the war was over with. No, that was the only thing. I survived that pretty easy. No.
What was your experience with the French civilians?
What?
Did you ever associate with any of the French civilians?
No, I really didn't, I don't think. To me, now maybe the ordinary rifleman or something like that would be having more experience going through towns with them, but we went through those towns always in a half track, so we didn't really. The maintenance did. I really didn't get involved in too many of them.
Did you ever have any association with any of the concentration camps?
Yeah. See, Landsberg, I was at probably 75 feet, 100 feet away from the prison camp at Landsberg when they opened the gate. Um, Gil Heine and I come to dispute. He wasn't there. He said, "You didn't." And we was arguing back and forth here since we've had these reunions, you know. And finally, I got a fax from Bob Howeiler. He found out that there was 11 concentration camps in Landsberg. So I guess part of their company opened up the gate of one of them, and we were at another spot, see, the back part of our company. And we were held up for a while because across the valley, a deep ravine with water down the bottom, there was Germans on the other side, where the concentration come, and they were shooting at us, and we had to bail out on the other side of the half tracks and hit the ground. And there's a row of trees right by it, and a shell, I don't know what kind of a shell they had, but it hit the tree and blew shrapnel over, and two of the guys that got shrapnel in the back and butt, so thank goodness I didn't. But anyway, they finally eliminated them, and I imagine because half of our company had already separated, see, because of them. And the tanks moved up and blew those people apart on the other side. It all stopped. And then they opened up the gate, and I would say 75% of the people in the prison camp at Landsberg that I not helped, but I was there, crawled out. They couldn't walk. They crawled out of the camp, and they were there by the hundreds, coming out all at the same time they tried it, because you can imagine if you were there and starving to death, and just knew it was the end, and all of a sudden somebody opens the gate and you can get out. Very few of them walked out, and some of them, they clogged the front of the entrance because some of them got 20 or 30 feet out and they couldn't go anymore, and they was sitting up or laying down, just staring at us. And that pretty soon people had to almost run over the other people to get out, but they had empty fields on both sides of us, and boy, they were scattered out. When we left 20, 30 minutes later, they were scattered all over that field, both sides. And that was another kind of a sad thing in Army, to see people. When they first done it, we didn't know, and we didn't have a radio or anything. We had no contact of what was going on. We couldn't figure out whether it was Americans or who they were. And then they finally came down that they were Jews and Polacks, weren't they? Yeah. And so they knew it wasn't Americans after a while, but before we ever left there, we knew it wasn't Americans already. But that was a kind of a sad mess to see too. I call it a mess because I don't mean it in that direction, but it was really. And then we went on eventually, and so it was surprising to find out there was 11 concentration camps in Landsberg.
Do you remember where you were at when they announced that the war was over?
Well, I was at the Austrian border. I'm not so sure that I knew exactly the day at the time, but we landed in that town, and we was to take that town, and I can't remember what it was. It was still in Germany, but it was probably, they said it was within 3 or 4 miles of the Austrian border. And we got in there, and everybody unloaded and walked into town, and there was not a bullet fired. Found out all the officers were sitting in the bars drinking, and the enlisted men were upstairs, and all the haylofts sleeping. So, and we took that town without a shot being fired, without the boys having to fire. And I don't know what town it is, but whether the war was over at that time or not, I'm sure it was a couple of days later than that, but because we stayed in that town until the war was over. Yeah. I don't know what else to
Did you have to serve in the Army of Occupation?
No, unless it was, see, the war was over May 5th or something like that. And I left about the 1st of February. Maybe is that
Yeah.
Army of Occupation?
Yeah.
We went to Rosenberg and stayed. It's about some say it was 50 miles, some say it was 100 miles from where we were. We drove one day and landed in Rosenberg. And there again, whoever was running ahead had so many houses already empty, like the one we stayed in. The maintenance stayed in it, and the anti-tank platoon stayed in a two-story house. And we really had to help the people move. They had already known they had to leave and so forth, but we moved some of the stuff over across the street, and it was just a lady and her son and a young 16-year-old girl that we thought was a daughter, and I didn't know that until about 10 years ago that it wasn't their daughter. But anyway, we were there at, and I guess we were there for probably 6-7 months, something like that. And I guess we stayed there. We never left and went anyplace else until we got ready to go. We left, so I guess it was longer than that time that we was in. I wasn't there probably 3 weeks, and 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks, and they came down that anybody that wanted to play football said go to Heidenheim and sign up, and so I played football in high school. So as soon as that call came, I said, well, good. So there was 4 of us left in a Jeep and went to Heidenheim and signed up for it. And, there was a lot of big college people and semi-pros and 2 or 3 years of college and so forth signing up for this football. I knew I'd never stand a chance if I went through 3 years of high school and played football, so I went to three years of high school and I think 2 or 3 years of college. Signed up that I did too. See, you got to tell a lie once in a while, don't you? Or write a story or something. So anyway, I wound up as a first string tackle on the football team, and we played four games. There was 4 in the 12th Armored Division. There was 4 football teams. See, and so I think it was just the 66 was part of it, and it could have been the infantry. But anyway, there was 4 teams, and we beat all 4 of them, and then we played in Berlin. But I didn't. There was 4 of us that didn't go. I got hurt in the leg a little bit towards the last game, and I thought, there's no use going. And I had to ride a truck. They was taking 2 big semi trucks up there. I mean, regular Army trucks up there, and you'd have to ride for 8 hours on that truck. And there was 4 of us that didn't go up to play the final game. And I guess we'd had enough football practice and playing and everything in the 4 games. So let's see. Now that was Rosenberg, and I could go on after the war about Rosenberg if you wish and get it over with. This little 2.5-year-old kid of theirs, almost every day he came over to our place over there. And after the first time, well, he knew why he came over, because when he left, he had his pockets full of candy and gum. We'd kid him, and we couldn't talk to him, and he couldn't talk to us. But it was we had fun with the little. I guess he was probably 3 years old, and after that we finally left, and then I would say 15 years ago, or maybe a little longer, Leon and I went to Germany, and we rented a car. We was going on a tour of Bavarian area. And we got there about 3 days ahead of time, and then I rented a car and drove down to Rosenberg. And I didn't know how I was going to talk to that old lady, if she was still around or if they lived there yet, see, but because she was fairly elderly then yet when we were there. So there was a lady dressed up real nice and on the street standing there talking to somebody. I went up to her and asked her if she spoke English. She said, "Oh, little." And so I told her that I lived in that house after the war, and the lady is out in the garden hoeing like she did when we were there, see. And she was out there, and I don't think she speaks any English, and I'd like to talk to her about that I was here, see. And so, sure. So she went over and talked to her in German, then introduced me, and we conversed back and forth between English and German. And I told her that we were here, and we had the girl that I thought was her daughter. I said we were the ones that called your daughter Honey Bunch. I told this girl, and so this lady repeated it to this German, and she just threw up her hands. Yeah, she knew exactly who we were because we'd called her daughter Honey Bunch. We found out later that wasn't her daughter. She was just happened to be walking down in the town and she didn't know where she was or where she came from or anything. But anyway, she stopped there, and she worked on their little ranch and so forth there. So, but anyway, when we got back home from that trip, the little kid who was teaching school, he's close to the east Germany, but still on the west side. But anyway, his wife had already written to us at home. When we got a letter, we got home, the letter was already there. And we've been to their place 3 times, either 3 or 4. And we've always stayed in the town. I can't remember now that we stayed in the town there because they always, they had a smaller house and 4 kids. And 3 of the kids have been to our place here, visited us here. And one of them just sent us an email after the bombing, after the plane things in the towers, that said he didn't know how to explain it, and said he was sorry to hear all of that, and he emailed us. He usually emails us back and forth every month or so. So we're still in contact with him. Nice. And we talk about the war and that, knowing to get over there. They both speak good English because they were both teachers, and I think they both retired now, but they teach and they educate themselves. And the kids that came over here, the 3 of them, they can talk English as well as I can. They had 7 and 8 years of English. And the oldest one works for Lucent in some city there. Lucent Technology, is there something like that? Okay.
All right. How do you think your war experience has changed your life?
Hard to say. I don't know. Like a lot of people said, and I guess I would say the same thing. I was a kid going in and a man coming out, but I really don't think it changed my life as that much. When I got injured or captured or saying, but I've kind of put the atrocities and the troubles behind me, I think, and I never used to talk about the war very much. Never used to say anything about it, and until 30 years ago when they started me on coming to the reunions, and then you get interested in it, and I think more people you get talking about it. But no, I wouldn't say it affected me any. What I would say.
Well, with your experiences that you had in the war, what would you like the future generations to learn from what you went through and what you fought for?
Oh, I don't know. It all comes out, there's enough people saying things, I think, that I don't know. I wouldn't know what to say that they're doing right or wrong. Just so they don't have another Vietnam War, that's the main thing. I guess it's there's pros and cons of what happened and what they did do and didn't do there, but at least we done it and got it finished. And if you're going to talk about somebody, let's go over and do it and finish it. I guess that's the main thing you would say to as of today.
So what if we've talked before? You did fairly well after the war in your business and retired early. What have you been doing since retirement? Early retirement.
Since I retired?
Since early retirement, yeah.
Well, I retired in '79, but we have leases and commercial and industrial leases, and that doesn't quite keep me busy, but I keep busy at other things. I've been president of 6 organizations in Corona, and been president of the Lions Club twice. So, things like that keep you busy. And I've been president of the chamber back in 1983, and I still go down and do things at the chamber once in a while, or go down to, I'm an ambassador there and so forth. So they keep busy that way. That's what I do. And we make a lot of trips. We haven't lately, but it seems like we've been all over the world and enjoyed every trip we've been on. We have a home at Dana Point. It's about a half a mile from the water, and we're about 400 feet above the water, and we can see about 180 degree from the living room and the kitchen and so forth. And we can see the ocean, and we're looking directly at Catalina Island. And then we also have a 3-bedroom home at the mountains at Lake Gregory, and both places are just an hour drive from home. And so if we're not at one place, we're at the other place. And then we also have a 37-foot motor home, and we go someplace usually about every third weekend. We belong to a motorhome group, and every third weekend there's some place to go, and we take that. So the motorhome we got now was a new motorhome in Reunion in Omaha, and we took it to Omaha, and then the one in Denver we had another motorhome before, and took it to the Reunion in Denver. We always stayed in a hotel, but we took our time and took a trip that way. Anyway, that's what keeps me busy, either relaxing and we just moved from 2 years ago. We sold our house, and I had 2.5 acres, and my youngest daughter had a horse there for 20 years, and a lot of upkeep in 2.5 acres. So I finally sold the house, and we moved into a townhouse that we've had for 20 years. And we got through, before we sold it, we moved the renters out, and I had a contractor go in. We completely tore the inside of the house out and put all new walls in it, and turned the kitchen around so you'd look across the valley and at the sink, and so Leona wouldn't be washing dishes or getting dishes or lunch ready and looking at a blank wall. So we did that, and everything in the house is new. So we're all set for, we hope, for a good life.
Okay. Well, I don't have any other questions. Did you have anything else that you'd like to, any other experiences that you wanted to have on tape?
No, my hour's probably up, see, that way.